But that's the number one thing that I've seen affecting people in the current market is builders now trying to get out of these contracts they signed a year or so ago in order to take advantage of these higher prices.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
It's crazy.
So as you know, like the Austin market is really hot right now.
Oh, yeah.
And so people are having a hard time buying homes.
For sure.
So a lot of times people are like buying new construction homes and waiting 6 to 12, however long for them to get built. And I'm curious from your perspective, if there's things that buyers should look for in the contract or be wary of, or things to think about when they're like purchasing a contract or buying a home that's like going to be built in like 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. The number one thing is don't think that those timelines are set in stone, because you're right. All of those contracts are going to say we're going to build it in 6 to 12 months. That almost never actually happens, though. It's not at all unusual for the timeline to get delayed. So that's one thing a buyer should make sure they're paying attention to when they're signing the contract, is realizing that the language in the contract inevitably will say that there could be a reason to extend the time frame. And so buyers who are relying on that completion date should probably still make sure they have housing for a little bit longer than how long they think the house will take to be made, because that's definitely the number one thing I'm seeing with people, is that they're like, oh, well, they said the house would be done in 6 to 12 months, so I had my lease end in 6 months. No, don't do that. Like, make sure you have as much time built in as possible. The other thing is, there is no harm at all in having an attorney walk through the contract with you before you sign it. And in fact, that's something that a builder should allow you to do if you ask for one extra day or so to review it with an attorney. And having that attorney walk through the contract with you, it might cost you a couple $100 to get someone to sit there and walk it through with you, but it's totally worth it, because there are going to be traps. And the Texas Association of Builders contract is the one that most builders will use for new builds. That is very heavily favored towards the builder. So having an attorney walk through that with you and let you know what you might be getting yourself into, 100% worth the few $100s to have that review done.
What kind of traps, like, do you have, I don't know if you've had any past experience with like kind of things that people might see, or traps or perceived traps?
Yeah. So one of the big ones too that we're seeing a lot in Austin with how hot the market is that home prices in the last 12 months have jumped crazily. You know, things that were previously selling for 400 are now selling for 600 or 700.
Yeah.
Places that were normally 700 are now for $1 million plus. So obviously builders who signed contracts a year ago are now having a bit of seller's remorse, thinking like, oh my goodness, you know, I could have sold this for $300,000 more than what I'm doing now. So most builder contracts actually have a clause that a builder can terminate for convenience, basically.
Oh, okay.
And all they need to do is refund you your earnest money. And they just have to be like, well, you know, you just kind of annoyed me, so I decided to terminate the contract. And I've seen that happen. And people are like, how can they do that? They can, unfortunately. The law is favored towards them, and their contracts that they themselves write are, of course, going to be favored towards them. So a lot of times, those loopholes are written in there where all they need to do is refund you your earnest money you've already paid, any other funds you've already paid, and maybe, you know, like a $100 or $200 extra fee. But that's the number one thing that I've seen affecting people in the current market, is builders now trying to get out of these contracts they signed a year or so ago in order to take advantage of these higher prices.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
It's crazy.
Because that pretty much says that like the builder can get out of the contract for like any reason, but even the buyer can't, doesn't even have that option.
Correct. And a lot of times, in fact, it'll say if the buyer terminates the contract for convenience, they forfeit their earnest money.
Yeah.
So the $20,000, $30,000 deposit or more, sometimes people put down a $100,000 deposit, that could be forfeited if they try to walk away and they don't really have a good cause to do so.
It's only a one-way street.
Yeah, it's it's really unfair to buyers in this market. Really unfair.
Okay. Well, that's good to know for some of our buyers.
Yeah.